In August 2010, a woman named Tamir Eaton got to her home in this Cleveland neighborhood and she found a car blocking her driveway. She called police to have it towed. She got ready for bed. What she didn't know was that Cleveland police were already in her neighborhood. They were looking for a suspect in an unrelated case. After Tamir Eaton called in that car blocking her driveway, the officers responding to that totally unrelated other case, they came upon a man and a woman walking down the street in that neighborhood. They decided they were going to arrest the man. The woman he was with objected to that loudly. And this all happened right outside Tamir Eaton's house. She'd gone to bed after calling the police to get a tow truck to clear her driveway. From inside her house, she heard this commotion with the police on the sidewalk outside her house, and she apparently thought that arrest in progress had something to do with her call about the driveway. Now, she just wanted a tow truck. She didn't want somebody arrested for her complaint, and so she went outside and argued with the officers about what was going on. One of the officers responded by rushing her, putting her in a chokehold, tackling her to the ground, twisting her wrists around, and then he started punching her, beating her up, pummeling her in the body. This is the woman who called for the tow truck. City of Cleveland ultimately paid $100,000 to that woman to settle that case for that officer beating her up. Personal stress, I do not believe the patrolman shows the maturity needed to work in our employment. The pattern developing within our short time frame with the patrolman is that he often feels that when told to do something, those instructions are optional. In law enforcement, there are times when instructions need to be followed to the letter, and I'm under the impression the patrolman will not react in the way instructed under certain circumstances. I'm recommending he be released from the employment of the City of Independence. I do not believe time nor training will be able to change or correct these deficiencies. That was in his personnel file at his old job. But Cleveland never looked at his personnel file from his old job when they hired him anyway. That young officer had been pushed out of the department in the suburbs for immaturity and for losing his composure around firearms. And lots of other law enforcement agencies that he applied to in the region did look at that personnel file and wouldn't hire him because of his history, but Cleveland never checked, and they thought he was fine. And so they hired him, and they partnered him with the cop whose treatment of that woman with the car blocking her driveway had cost the city $100,000 because of the older cop's behavior. And on November 22nd last year, those were the two officers who rolled up to 12-year-old Tamir Rice, and not 3 seconds later, Tamir Rice was dead. The officer with the big settlement was driving the car. The guy who'd been pushed out of his previous job for immaturity around firearms, he's the one who fired the shots 2 seconds after encountering that kid. Ever since the police killing of Tamir Rice, it's been a worrying litany of revelations about Cleveland, about the Cleveland Police Department, and about what happened that day and what led up to it. I mean, starting with the history of the two officers involved. Last week, we also got this new video showing that police handcuffed Tamir Rice's 14-year-old sister when she ran to help him after these officers had shot him. They handcuffed her, they put her in the backseat of the patrol car right there as her brother lay dying in the snow while no one gave him first aid for several minutes. One of the central questions in this case, from the very beginning, has been why those police officers were never told that the gun Tamir Rice had been seen with in that park was probably a fake. It was a 911 call that started this whole incident. The 911 call included that information. Why didn't the 911 dispatcher pass that crucial information on to the police who responded to the incident? This was the call.
I'm sitting in the park at West Boulevard by the West Boulevard Rapid Transit Station. And there was a guy in there with a pistol. You know, it's probably fake, but he's like pointing it at everybody. The guy keeps pulling it in ours. It's probably fake, but you know what? It's scaring the shit out of me.
He says it twice. It's probably fake. It's probably fake. And that guy was right. Turned out to be a realistic-looking BB gun. It's not a real gun. But somewhere in the chain of communication between the person who took that emergency call and the dispatcher who relayed that information to police to go check out, somewhere, that crucial impression that was repeated twice by the 911 caller, that was lost. That was never passed on. This is what the dispatcher told those police.
in the park by the youth center. Supposed to be a male sitting on the swings pointing a gun at people. Wearing a camouflage hat, a gray jacket with black sleeves. So he keeps pulling a gun out of his pants and pointing it at people.
Caller saying the gun was probably fake twice. That never made it to the officers who were dispatched to the scene. We do not know yet whether the dispatcher got that information and then failed to relay it to the cops, or whether she never got it from the information who answered the emergency call. We don't know. But we learned today from the Cleveland Plain Dealer that the dispatcher, who you just heard talking to the cops there, she had been fired from her previous dispatch job with another police department. She had also been arrested in 2008 and charged with bringing a gun into a bar. Plain Dealer says it's not clear whether the city of Cleveland knew about her arrest. They say she's been given high marks for her performance in Cleveland. But now we've got three people very closely involved in this case, each with a backstory that is at least cause for worry about Cleveland and its police department, right? And how they do their hiring. I mean, the killing of young Tamir Rice is one of the most, if not the most, disturbing case in a long line of recent cases where police officers have killed an unarmed African-American male. Right? The Tamir Rice case fundamentally is a case about justice. But the way this case has played out in Cleveland is also very worrying just about Cleveland, right? Cleveland is a major city. Cleveland is one of the largest cities in the Midwest. The Republican Party just picked Cleveland for their 2016 convention, which is going to be extra early this year. I mean, what the heck is going on in Cleveland that you scratch the surface of a single tragedy, a single case like this, and you find all of this just beneath the surface? Joining us now is Cleveland City Councilman Zach Reed. Mr. Reed, thanks very much for being with us. I appreciate your time tonight.
Thank you for allowing me, Rachel.
I'd have to ask you at first just if this looks worse than it is. I mean, are the problems in Cleveland as bad as they look from the vantage point of this case, or is this case just a point at which a lot of things went wrong that otherwise aren't a systemic problem?
I think this is the case where we finally are going to get help from the federal government, because the problems that have existed within our police force have continued and continued and continued. And finally, thanks to Eric Holder and President Barack Obama, help is on its way.
The Federal Justice Department has investigated the Cleveland Police Department twice in the past 10 years. As you mentioned, it was Attorney General Eric Holder who last month called for big reforms in the police department. The city's been somewhat welcoming toward that intervention. But this is the second time that the federal government has come in to Cleveland in the past decade. Do you have more hope that this second time, this new intervention really could make a big enough difference?
Well, the first time was voluntary. This time, thanks to our Congresswoman Marcia Fudge, she asked for a consent decree to be put in place. That means that we're now going to have a federal moderator, we're going to have a monitor, we're going to have a federal judge. So therefore, it's almost like in the civil rights days when you had the Bull Connors and you had the George Wallaces, until the federal government came in and they monitored the situation. The situation just kept going on and on. So thanks to Congresswoman Marcia Fudge, we're going to have a consent decree in place, and therefore the federal government is going to do what I wish they would have done years ago, and that's to continue to look at this police force until we get a police force that the people can trust and that is working with the citizens so that we can have the best police force in the entire nation.
Do you feel like people in Cleveland are hopeful that the resolution of the Tamir Rice case in particular, but also that federal takeover that you're talking about, do you feel like there is optimism in Cleveland that things could get better? I mean, looking at the longstanding problems in Cleveland and how many high-profile bad incidents there have been, the systemic problems and things like hiring and background checks that we've uncovered just with the Tamir Rice case, I feel like it's hard to look at that and be able to envision a better time. What's the mood in the city?
Well, when you know that a 12-year-old boy tragically lost his life, the optimism comes from the federal government. You know, like I say, if you look at the analogy of the civil rights movement, until the federal government went to the South and the federal government started looking at and evaluating each and every one of those incidents that occurred, there was no hope for the African-American community. Well, now, since the federal government is going to come in and there's going to be a consent decree in place, there's more hope. There's more optimism that things are going to get better, and we're going to get the police force that we rightfully deserve here in a major city like Cleveland, Ohio.
Cleveland City Councilman Zach Reed, thank you for talking with us about this. It's good to get your perspective on it. Thank you. All right. We've got lots more ahead tonight, including a best new thing in the world, which is one of the best new things in the world that we have had in a very long time. If you have had a tough day today, and I know there are those out there who have, if you have had a tough day, I have the cure. Stay with us.